Hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. Wow, gone in straight live. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Victor Lebon. I'm the Chief Innovation and Strategy Officer at ICP. And hand over to Becky.
Hi everyone, thanks Victor. I'm Becky Caldwell. I work for Mars Inc. as Global Digital Content Director. Michael?
Hey, thanks Becky. I'm Michael Weeman. I'm a global digital commerce and digital transformation leader. For the past 5 years, I designed and directed digital innovation, acceleration, and transformation initiatives for the Coca-Cola company.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Becky and Michael, for joining me, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm just going to share a quick slide to kick off this session. Bear with me just as I get this in presenter mode. So just a very quick intro to today's session. It's partly a call to action for all the creative and brand teams out there to talking about e-commerce and to really see the opportunity for e-commerce to extend more than just a point of sale. So the theme behind this piece is relationships, hence the love loading slide. We got a few stats about how, for example, online dating exploded last year in the context of the pandemic. And you can see some of these figures that are absolutely significant and huge. But really, the reason for this conversation today is all about building relationships between brands and customers. And we believe that e-commerce presents a fantastic opportunity to develop and build the relationships with your consumers, with your customers. And we wanted to invite people on the call. So first of all, Michael and Becky will share some insights from their side and my side as well on how we can take this channel, realize the opportunity that it represents, and really expand and explode that to demonstrate the real value that it can bring for you and your consumers. So with that set up, I'll stop sharing for a second and I will tee up Michael and Becky with a question, if I can direct it to you. So I'd love if you could share some background and context from your perspectives of why larger brands and organizations have historically had these separate shopper e-com or really point of sale focused attitude towards e-commerce versus your standard marketing communications, with the media plans and seeing e-commerce as a media, as a marketing communications channel and outlet. Becky, can you share some insights from your point of view on that?
Absolutely, thanks Victor. So I think firstly, when e-commerce first came into big brand organizations, it was another retail channel. It wasn't a marketing platform. So those teams were really set up to be siloed. They were experts, they were learning, and we hadn't really established what retailers in that space were going to do. So actually, the platforms have also evolved to have more capability, to offer more in terms of marketing. But the result is those teams were set up initially without that focus. So really, from where I'm sat in big organizations, the teams have now been unintegrated and we've got to kind of shift the change and educate people. So really from a background and context point of view, there's just been a shift in demand, a shift in behavior, and now we've got to play catch up.
Michael, do you want to add anything to that?
I think Becky probably has experience in this area, but maybe something to contribute, and I'm not sure this is exhaustive or one size fits all, but it does feel like with my transformation lens, there's something in the traditional consumer versus shopper concepts. In summary, the consumer was largely considered the pre-store user of a brand and the shopper was the in-store chooser. Today, billions of consumers are no longer going shopping. They literally are shopping at every moment of the day, online, across a variety of touch points, and on more devices than in more places before. So it feels to me there's a traditional distinction with some antiquated elements on which companies have likely keyed as they built out their organizations.
Thanks. Thank you to both of that. I mean, just to kind of share a personal story on that as well. I mean, years ago, I was talking to the head of e-commerce at a large global CPG organization. And I asked him, why don't marketing teams include e-commerce as part of their media schedules and their media plans? He threw his arms up in the air and went, oh my God, I've been trying to convince people of this for the last 10 years. and e-commerce people were often in these dark rooms, and it was like a technical thing that people just did. And all the really cool, sexy, exciting stuff were happening in other channels, you know, TV, of course, but even social, that got a lot more good press than anything else. So it's I think for a long time, e-commerce has not been that central focus for marketing communications, just the place where you go to sell stuff. So, and really, you know, for the audience, all of that is changing. I want to kind of share some stats with you for how e-commerce in the last year has absolutely exploded. Now, I'm sure you all can appreciate with the pandemic just how that's changed our shopping habits. But to clarify, this is something that was happening even before the pandemic. The pandemic really only just accelerated and condensed that in a very short space of time. But to kind of share with you some stats, so you know, U.S. retail e-commerce increased 32%. And 45% year on year. Again, you can see some more stats. Target, 273% increase. Walmart's e-commerce sales, 97%. And of course, no surprise, Amazon saw record profit. I think what's interesting about these stats is that it's not just the typical e-commerce channels like your Amazon, or we have companies like Walmart where their goods, maybe like food and beverages, just how significantly that's gone up. And that trend is not predicted to decrease over time. That is planned to be sustained. So just sharing some of those key stats with you. And you know, I'd like to turn it over to Michael to ask, you know, how have you seen in your experience in the last year, in particular, how has the maturity within large organizations like that you've worked in, how's the maturity and the appreciation for this new alignment and the opportunity shifted? How has that changed?
Yeah, I think there's probably two facets to the question. One is around the appreciation, and then the other is around the maturity. And so I think from experience and research, I feel the appreciation has shifted massively. Look, the objective growth stats are simply astonishing. In addition to the one you just shared, global e-commerce sales have accelerated 30% in 2020, the single largest growth period since the 1990s. Some industry estimates now predict total online sales to eclipse 4.5 trillion US by the end of the year. That's up from 1.3 trillion in 2014. And I think this dramatic shift to digital purchasing is fueled by consumers' demand for faster, cheaper, more convenient access to house staples, certainly and especially in the face of the global pandemic. I've obviously spent a lot of time in CPG, and specific to CPG, e-commerce's percentage of total food and beverage sales in 2020 were forecasted to be only 3%. But CPG saw spikes as high as 12 to 15% in the first 6 months of the pandemic. And a sustained e-commerce market share of 5 to 7% would be a tipping point for CPG, just as it has been for other large organizations. So yes, the pandemic created, accelerated, decelerated a number of trends. But I think for many, the hastening of the shift to digital stores and the need to realize online to offline propositions may be the most jarring to do it as quickly as they're being asked. And many estimate the shift has been accelerated 5 years in only a 6-month period of time. And so I think in turn, that's hastened several points of recognition for brands. One, there's a massive opportunity to meet this new demand and acquire millions of new customers seeking to acquire products digitally. The second is that omni-channel interaction now drives overall customer experience, with shoppers pinballing across a variety of multiple online, offline touch points in this path to purchase. And then thirdly, addressing the opportunity requires swift and deliberate action to redeploy resources and investment dollars across digital sales enablement to ensure maximization of the online and offline market share. I think the second facet to your question was around maturity. And I think this is, for most, at best, a work in progress. That said, I've seen some really promising activity across brands. I think there's been a lot of thinking around integration of marketing experiences, connecting the consumer journey, ensuring consistency across online and offline touchpoints. There's been a lot of activity around SKU rationalization to reduce friction. Coca-Cola, Mattel, Mondelez are among others that have announced significant rationalization initiatives. There's significant D2C investment by brands to address consumer behavior shifts from COVID. but also to benefit from engaging the consumer directly and controlling that experience more broadly. There's also been an uptick in investment in voice, such as Amazon Alexa and Google Voice. I think there's been a real disturbing realization for many that voice often disintermediates the consumer from all your stunning visual creative capital. But there's also opportunities for unique discovery, education, ordering, while accommodating contactless transaction. And then organizationally, I think there's been an accelerated pace of investment in innovation teams and partnerships to deliver unique consumer experiences. I call out examples like Princess Group in the UK that's merged its insights and innovation departments in order to deliver fast-paced innovation projects, as well as its partnership with innovation agency Kubo.
Thanks for that. Becky, do you want to add to that? How have you seen that change in your organization?
Absolutely. I think Michael makes some amazing points from statistics and the global pandemic and consumers. And I think from my area, we've got different categories as well. So some categories have really won in the last year and been able to leverage that maturity, jump on the bandwagon, really look at how they maximize those opportunities. And then there's been other categories that have actually really suffered from that massive online uptake. And I think really recognizing that maybe those categories weren't necessarily set up for success, but it doesn't mean they can't be. And really looking to those leading areas to learn, to exercise, to challenge. Consumers didn't start online shopping, so they can always learn. And really looking at that maturity model for adoption and engagement. And not being afraid to challenge the status quo.
That's great. And just to add a quick comment on that, I think what I've seen from my point of view working with different companies is that, look, brands and companies have been forced into this, right? Their usual traditional channels that they could communicate with their consumers for brand building and positioning, not just point of sale, but that brand communication cycle, they didn't have access to them, right? People were not looking at billboards outside. They weren't going into the galleries. They weren't even watching a lot of traditional TV. It was all to video on demand. So that had been shifted. So they still had to connect with their consumers somehow. Those organizations that had been not planning for the pandemic, but building their e-commerce capabilities over many years and their content strategies, they were laughing because they're like, well, we're already set up to do this. And those companies that weren't, they had a mad scramble to try and catch up. Shifting marketing creative plans, shifting their spend, upskilling their teams, putting systems in place. In some cases, it was really a mad scramble. And most organizations have, risen to the challenge. And those who've been planning for it for a while have really managed to step up. But I think that debate that I was talking about with the head of e-commerce about why not including that in the media plans, I think he's won the argument now. I think most people will now appreciate the opportunity that this represents. So going into my next question, I think really this is, I hope, probably the most engaging part of it is beyond just the core basics of how to do e-commerce well, right? So having product images that, of course, having a number of them, they're consistent, having content above the fold or below the fold, moving images and some brand building content. So across, whether you're going direct to consumer or B2B2C or B2B, I wanted to talk about, what would good look like and how to address that gap. So from my point of view, a vision of the future that I would like to aspire to is where e-commerce is part of brands' media plans and media channel strategies for any campaign that they launch. So you wouldn't dream of having a media plan or schedule that didn't include social, for example. You'd be insane in this day and age not to do that. But e-commerce almost always gets left out. So having it as a matter of course that it gets included in your media plans and your media spend and your creative strategies. So that I would love to see that in the future. Again, for me, that would be what success would look like. But the second piece would be if there was a creative execution or creative idea that had e-commerce as its channel execution focus, that might win an award at Cannes for creativity. That kind of shift is really what it's going to take. I look forward to that world because I've seen it in some parts of the world, and to really explode and have it as that two-way communication channel. So that's my vision. I'm going to stick to it and try to make it a reality. But I'd love to ask you, how can the gaps that remain to getting to that utopia, to generate really internally the demand within these large corporate companies or with the creative agencies just to appreciate the opportunities and to really get people to drive for that and to have creative pitches for it or briefs requesting it? And what might be some of the obstacles to getting to that vision? Becky, do you want to take that one?
Absolutely. So, Victor, it's no surprise that this is a topic I'm very passionate about, and one I've actually been partnering with yourselves and ICP with to help us actually get across some of these obstacles. And from a global lens, I think first and foremost, the biggest obstacle is looking at a Pareto rule. Where can you apply 80% to everybody, and where do you just have to accept that there's a 20% personalization requirement, be it for the category, be it for the consumer, be it because of the market maturity. But I, hand on my heart, believe that there is an 80% opportunity that can fit everybody, and you just have to be really smart about what that looks like to operate. In terms of the how in an organization, and obviously I don't think anyone will be surprised that it means a lot of change management, stakeholder engagements, and conversations. But I think be humble about it, because actually when you've been an expert in this space, sometimes you can seem so surprised that people just don't see it or they don't get it. You're like, why are you not getting this? It's so simple, it's so obvious. It's not that obvious to everybody. And actually, one of my biggest learnings has been assume they know nothing in the nicest way and help them. And we've had a lot of leaders thank us for that, because actually they were saying no to things or pushing out conversations because they didn't feel like they could actually input. They didn't know what they were supposed to be challenging or approving. So really think about that knowledge base first and foremost before you ask for a big shift in change, and help them come on that journey. And then I think it's really about how and what you do. I've written white papers if you want to take an Amazon approach. Some people love it, some people hate it. But that worked well. Don't make it fancy, literally just give people the facts and the vision. And then you can go into doing the fancy, sexy stuff. But I think really looking at who you want to do that. You mentioned it at the beginning, Victor. Pick your partners. I work with ICP very closely, and it's been amazing. And also learn from external people. Don't be afraid to say, who are my non-competes? Let's go and have some really visionary and fun conversations and challenge each other, because actually, if you're not going to get that internally, it's really important you're having those thought-provoking conversations externally to take forward thinking into your business. So I think there's a lot of movement. I think there's a lot of room for maneuver, but I definitely think it's doable. And it's going to take, to your point, Victor, of how, it's probably going to take an award from somebody or an agency bringing something to the table. If you're an agency sat on this call, I would challenge you to take an e-commerce led campaign to a team and say, what have we lost by trying this? Because actually you've got to fail fast in this space, drop the ego and keep moving, because that's how we're all going to learn. So that would be my big movement, my big asks of everybody. Go and try something new. Don't be afraid to fail, because actually it's a learning and it's a way that we're all going to evolve in this space. And definitely bring your leadership teams on the journey, opposed to just assuming that they'll get it. I think COVID's definitely helped. We've had people suddenly shopping in this space when they didn't used to. So that also helps when they become online shoppers when they weren't before. But I go and enjoy it as well. I think e-commerce is a really fun space, creatively and from a consumer point of view. So just go and enjoy it as well.
Great. Michael, do you want to add anything to that? Thank you so much, Becky. That's fantastic. I think you're on mute, Michael, but catchphrase.
I think Becky's was a super comprehensive answer, especially when it gets to the actual planning stages. You know, if I took it a click up and just thought about it through the transformation lens, some of the things that I've experienced, I know some of my peers have experienced, breaking down those long-standing and entrenched organizational and role divisions across functions and corporate BU. You know, even for the roles that are required for digital shelf execution alone, such as content creation, data validation and integrity, data syndication, analytics, innovation, these roles generally aren't sitting in the same group or even tightly coordinated with many of these companies that haven't yet gone through this e-commerce transformation. And then, you know, for opportunities where centralization may benefit, there are some headwinds to change with that long-standing corporate versus BU role sort. And so I think those are the sort of things, as you really look to maximize the opportunity, you've got to address at an organizational level as well.
That's fantastic. So thank you both. I just have one more question for you. I'm just going to share my screen one last time as we kind of look to the future. And I want to share with you very briefly, many of you may be aware of what Singles Day is, which is an e-commerce event in China that was invented by Alibaba, one of the biggest e-commerce vendors. And they created this event all around the e-commerce digital shelf environment, targeted at Singles Day in place of Valentine's Day. So that was the premise. I think last year in the first minute, the first minute of trading on this day, they sold over $1 billion. And this is absolutely gigantic. So I just want to kind of show some examples of how they have taken this creative idea and experience way beyond just selling a product on a shelf. They had live music events and live streaming, you know, for product launches, or if you're more of a tech geeky person, that's probably me, they really kind of created this whole VR shopping experience. They made it an experience. They made it creative and they made it fun. And this is one they just launched this year, which was a tour of the Louvre Museum, where you could just look at the art and have it, you know, browse through the galleries and then maybe create your own product. So co-creation. I want a picture of the Mona Lisa on a handbag because that's just me, and I want to express myself in that way. So, you know, turn it over to Becky and to Michael. You know, in a few words, what do you think? Because that's a little bit scary, right? But in crystal ball of the future, where do you think this can go? You know, some of the innovative stuff that's out there, opportunities for the future. Michael, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, in terms of sizzle capabilities, I'm really fascinated by the opportunities in augmented reality. You know, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, Apple, all putting large amounts of R&D into this area, so the capability and the adoption should increase significantly and quickly. I think the efforts have demonstrated an ability to really cut through the noise and drive high levels of engagement. And it's got applicability for online and offline. And I call out companies like iCandy in the UK doing some really interesting work in this space. I'm also watching the development of digital ecosystems. So it's estimated that the leading retailer customers in 2025 will all be ecosystems: Alibaba, Amazon, Walmart, Schwarz Group. With 3P marketplaces at their core, there are huge amounts of shoppers and data. And this data is fueling these ecosystem expansions into other verticals like logistics and social entertainment. This optimization is then allowing them to create these really sticky, personalized and convenient ecosystems. And it's going to be interesting to see what they afford brands in terms of opportunities for creativity and innovation within these ecosystems as they mature.
Becky, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think Singles Day definitely is intimidating when you're sat in the UK looking at retailer capabilities. So firstly, I think, you know, there's, from a CPG lens, there's also an expectation that retail needs to up their game in this space to be able to allow us to really accelerate and look at what else we can do. And I also think the point that Michael made of data, we talk about data-driven marketing all the time, but no one's really talking about what that truly means for e-commerce and how we unlock that data to create an experience. So I would love to start hearing what that would look like for the e-marketing space with data-driven marketing.
Fantastic. And on that point about data, I think it's spot on. You have an opportunity to collect and gather data in the e-commerce space like no other channel can afford you, because it's a two-way interaction between your consumers to how you can then combine that data and resurface it and personalize it. I mean, the opportunities, the creative opportunities are huge. So
Yeah.
we're running out of time. I just want to kind of go back to our closing slide. And what I wanted to say, we've intentionally put a few scary slides on here to kind of show you the creative opportunities and really the imperative to how to do this. What I will say in closing from my point of view is, don't worry, because there is expertise out there. So for ICP's perspective, we can provide support around content strategy and how to build your technology ecosystems and do the operational process. We still need partners from others, like Becky mentioned, a creative agency that needs to pitch this, a brand team that's going to have the vision. But there is expertise on how to set yourself up to succeed in this space. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, because there are companies like Coca-Cola, like Unilever, like Mars, who have got the expertise on how to set this up. So reach out to us either individually or in a group after the session. We'd be happy to take any questions that you have directly and, talk through some of your challenges. So that's it for me. Michael, do you want to say anything in closing?
You nailed it, Victor. As you know, we partner with ICP on strategies from digital asset management, tech ops, product content ecosystem, product imagery, supply chain. The value of bringing in external expertise to augment your internal talent is immense. And especially when that expertise spans verticals that can bring these learnings in from other industries that you may not have run across in your own world. And so opening that aperture is extraordinarily important, especially in such a space like e-commerce.
Becky, closing comments?
I think Michael topped it with that one. We've had very similar experiences with ICP, and it's been awesome to have that provocation and expertise and support along the journey. So I definitely encourage people to seek out support if they're sat there with all these amazing ideas and not knowing where to start.
Fantastic. Well, listen, thank you both so much for joining and for sharing your insights with the group. And thank you everyone on the call for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to have you. We look forward to you reaching out to us and having conversations directly with you. Thank you so much.